A weeknight ragu is perfect for anytime, but especially those times you come home from work and want to make something delicious. I'm going to take you through each component of this and tell you why flavor is being added, why it's important, and how you can make this just like I did. For a weeknight ragu, you want it to be quick cooking, but also still have that full ragu flavor. And if you don't know what a ragu is, it's a meat sauce. Very traditional, like a bolognese, except bolognese is from Bologna. A ragu can be really so many different things with a meat sauce, but you want to make sure it's full flavored, has that great vegetal undertone, and that's what we're starting with. So what I'm doing is grating all of my vegetables. You could use a food processor, but we're breaking them down so they cook really quickly. And you can see they're going to turn brown on me because I'm going with all of them, but I'm even grating my onion, and that's just making sure that once it hits that pan, it's going to start cooking really quickly. And you're going to think, this seems like an extra step. It is an extra step, but it's one that's worth it. So when you go through, you can even grate your mushrooms. You can just go through and just on a box grater like this, look how quickly they break down. This is such a nice way to make sure that everything's gonna evenly just kind of melt together. Those flavors are gonna melt together, but also it's gonna go really quickly. For a weeknight, I get it. We don't wanna have hours of looking at a stovetop, making sure something is cooking, letting it just simmer away. That's for a weekend. This is something we want to have a lot of flavor. Maybe if you get home after a long day, but still want something really delicious, that's what this is gonna be. So the only thing I did cut or dice by hand is gonna be my celery, because my celery, which you can see back here, has really thin cell walls and it kind of just shreds into these long strings if you try to do it on a box grater. Not gonna say how I found out, but believe me, it doesn't work. So you really do just wanna dice it. And now what we're gonna do is take all this with any of the juices from the onion, we're gonna put it right into some butter. I have melting on the stove. Butter is gonna be a richer, rounder flavor, and it's really gonna even out all these other flavors. So you can hear just a slight sizzle in there. That's what I want. Now with this, I'm gonna make sure I season it very well. I want a good amount of salt in the beginning to make sure it's seasoned in the end. So we're gonna let these just saute and really cook. I just minced up some garlic and now we're gonna add it. So you can see the vegetables really start cooking down. They lose their water, it starts cooking off and they really soften, and that's what you want because you want these to pretty much meld into nothing. So we're gonna add our garlic now. The reason we add it a little later is because we don't want it to get bitter or burn in that cooking process. So I just stir it in until it's fragrant, which in all honesty takes like 30 seconds. Like instantly it starts warming through, and that's what you want because you start smelling it, it's releasing those beautiful flavors. That's the important part. And now we're gonna add our ground beef. To me, this is like just a workhorse in the kitchen in the sense that we're gonna just make sure we keep adding flavor to it, but you can keep this in the freezer, ground beef, pull it out when you're ready, and then just start whatever meal you want. So I'm gonna really just make sure this cooks through. We're gonna break it up with these vegetables, and we'll move on. Once that beef is really broken down and cooked all the way through, which doesn't take too long, I wanna make sure I start adding some flavoring, some spices. So we have some just dried Italian seasoning. Again, this is weeknight, so I wanna do stuff that's just in the pantry, ready to go. A little bit of red pepper, that wakes everything up. It adds a little bit of spice, but not enough to be too much. And then just some black pepper, just to balance it out. And again, we want things that can be easily accessible, things that you can just keep on hand, not always just fresh herbs that we have to go buy or may go bad before we use them. So once that's stirred in, and it smells amazing, it does, we're gonna add a little bit of red wine. Now this seems like an extra step. It is. But what the red wine does is it really balances out with that a little bit of acidity, and it really just tenderizes the meat a little bit. It's amazing the difference in flavor if you add it or don't add it. And of course, if you can't, just don't and leave it out. And you just wanna make sure you let that red wine cook off because we don't want the strong red wine flavor, we want just a subtle undertone. So letting that cook off for a couple minutes, that's exactly what you want. So now what we're gonna add in is the diced tomatoes with some juice. And I wanna let these just come to a simmer for a little bit. We're not gonna let them simmer for hours. We're gonna let them just simmer here a short amount before we add everything else and just finish it up. This really came to a nice simmer, and that's what you want. You want it to be cooking and make sure those flavors start working together. And now we're gonna do a one pot stovetop. So that means putting everything else in there to cook. So we're gonna add a little bit of cream. Cream is one of the only things that can come to a boil. It will not break. It will add a nice richness to it. We're gonna add the noodles. I'm using these trumpets. I love how they grab onto that sauce. And what's great is, since we're cooking them right in the sauce, they're going to add that starchiness back into that ragu. So we're also gonna add some beef stock. And this is what's really going to help the noodles absorb everything they need while they're cooking. So I just wanna make sure I kind of stir that in. We're gonna bring it to a simmer. We're gonna cover it, and then it's just gonna be cooked. The noodles and everything in one and ready to go. So this has been cooking, and you can of course check the pasta. Different types of pasta will take different times, but at this point I wanna take it over, take it off the heat, and it smells so good. You know, it cooks really in just the time that the pasta takes once that pasta's added. It doesn't need hours of cooking, but when you stir it, you start seeing how beautiful and rich and thick it's becoming. Like, look how that pasta is just soaking in all of that flavor, which is exactly what you want. And it has so much of that meaty richness to it. So now, of course, you need a good dose of Parmesan right on top. So you need it to be real Parmesan. Don't get that bottled stuff. It has fillers with it. It doesn't have the same flavor that you want of the aged Parmesan. And as you stir this in, it actually helps just do its final thickening, and it adds that final seasoning too. And that to me is just like that super important and beautiful part. Now the best thing to do is let it sit for about 10 minutes before you serve. That's its final kind of like time, but I don't want to wait. I actually just want to serve it now. You can of course do this with like a side salad. You could have a nice crusty bread with it to really get the sauce. Those are the types of things to me that really kind of finish something out beautifully. But look how perfect that looks. You have a beautiful, just perfectly cooked noodle. That's the first step. And again, if you're gonna serve this, I would always say have some Parmesan that you can just sprinkle right on top too. That's gonna be, finish it off, chef's kiss, so good. And then you can just get right in there. Burn your mouth if you're me. For a weeknight ragu, this is absolute perfection. It might take a couple minutes longer than some weeknight meals, but honestly, this can come together in an hour or less. That to me is the calling of a good meal. It has tons of flavors. It has a full amount of everything that your family is gonna love. It's gonna fill them. It's gonna make them happy. And guess what? There may even be leftovers for you for the coming week. That's the best part. So what do I hope you do with this? I hope you make this weeknight ragu. That's the important part. I also hope you see how easy it is to actually do something homemade at home after work. So share this video around so other people can see too that this is easy. If I can do this, everybody can do this. Check my website, wiseguy.com. That's where you're gonna find this recipe. You can print it off, you can save it, whatever you want. Bookmark it because you're gonna wanna come back to it. Happy eating.